Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Asian Game, coming to you just moments after the final draw for the 2023 AFC Asian Cup, which, just to confuse matters, will be played in 2024. But that's a conundrum that we are getting used to. Paul Williams and Martin Lowe are alongside me, as is often the case, and I'm delighted to say we're also joined by another member of the TAG family, our resident West Asian guru, Wael Jabir, who is in Doha and is taking in all the action. There's been music going on well in the background. You're standing nearby as some of the luminaries, the coaches are filing past you as well. So what's your initial reaction to events? We'll get into the permutations of teams here, there and everywhere, but what was your impression of the draw? We saw the logo was unveiled, which for me looks like it ripped off the Transformers. I'm sure I'm not going to be the only person to have come up with that. It looks exactly like that. We saw pennants being exchanged, all sorts of ceremonial things. What was the occasion like?
Yeah, it was a brilliant draw for me. I think it was well organized. Lovely venue at the Opera House in Katara. A lot of who's who of Asian football come in. Only downside is the weather, obviously, and hence I'm not standing outside. Yeah, it's approaching 40 degrees now. Start of summer here in Qatar, so thankfully it's not going to be the case once the actual tournament starts in January. Weather will be lovely. But yeah, other than that, I think everything went very well. And now back at the official hotel where everyone is just arriving back from the venue, looking at all the coaches, all lots of the legends of Asian football just arriving back. So hopefully we can catch a couple of them.
Well, it's good to see they've got another legend of Asian football in you in place. So it's a gathering of rightful legends. Well, thank you very much. We'll get your thoughts on some of the groups in a little bit. Paul, as I said, welcome along. Mr. Martin Lowe, welcome back again. Let's kick things off with Group A, which I think we can refer to as the group of life. This is the hosts, Qatar, being slotted in against China, Tajikistan, and Lebanon. On paper, it probably looks to me one of the softest groups. Is this a situation of hot balls and warm balls to bring out the soft landing here for Qatar? And what do you make of the group?
Well, the whole draw ceremony was talking up Qatar and how they've supported Asia through the last few years. So I wouldn't be surprised if most people in AFC would be quite happy with the draw in terms of Qatar, obviously in a state at the moment following the World Cup. They had the group of life in the World Cup and that didn't really work out for them. So, but they couldn't have handpicked probably a better draw. China kind of still reeling from obviously multiple lockdowns. A lot of things are happening with the CFA, etc. Lebanon got a new coach in who's trying to kind of reconstruct things. It's not working out for him too well. Tajikistan are probably quite an interesting pick to take on, but they're still not at the same level as a number of the other groups. So, and even if you look a bit further, if Qatar get out of the group, they probably don't face anybody really strong until the kind of semi-final stage. So they've been given a nice group and a nice route through to the final. We'll see, obviously, in the Gold Cup to see if Kyrgios can change things around. But at the moment, there's a lot of work to be done, but at least they've got time to progress through this group.
Yeah, it's one of those strange situations, of course, 24 nations into 16. So we don't quite know exactly how things are going to plan out as well. It's not so easy to pick a route through it. We heard Carlos Queiroz talk after the draw as well. He said that he's happy to be here. He's happy to be at, I think he said, one of the world's best tournaments, and was asked about the group, and he said, well, you've got to beat the best to be the best. I'm not particularly sure he was referring to the group combatants, but yeah, he's talking it up. Paul, let's move on to Group B. Of course, our nation, Australia, slotted in against Uzbekistan, Syria, and India. So some familiar foes for Australia. Graham Arnold also spoke after the draw and said that Australia has actually played in Qatar more times recently than Qatar has actually played in Qatar. So it's obviously a home away from home. It has been during the whole COVID lockdown for the Socceroos as well. Familiar foes as well for Australia. What do you make of the group?
I just want to quickly touch on Group A. It's also, for me, the group of redemption, because you've got China and Qatar both trying to redeem their reputations after a pretty dismal last couple of years for their respective national teams as well. So be fascinated to see how they get on in that respect. For Australia, it's not the worst result, I don't think, for Australia. There's some tricky challenges there. They played both Syria and Uzbekistan at the last Asian Cup as well. Needed some Matty Ryan heroics to get past Uzbekistan on penalties. They had some nervy moments against Syria, and of course we know what happened in the playoff a few years before that for Russia 2018 as well. So there's some tricky challenges there. But Arnold has spoken a bit on the back of the World Cup of what they were able to achieve, of wanting to create what he sees as one of the best Socceroos teams of all time. So if that is the aim, then the objective should be to finish top of this group and to go deep into this tournament. So there's some banana skins, there's some challenges, but I certainly think for Australia, with where they look to be heading as a team, they should be aiming to finish top of this group. For India, I think it's a really unfortunate draw for India. They're going to face some tricky challenges, not just against Australia, but against the likes of Uzbekistan and Syria as well. We know Igor Stimac is under a lot of pressure in India. They would have been hoping for perhaps maybe something like a Group A situation, something a bit of a softer draw. They've landed themselves a pretty tough draw here, and it's going to be pretty an uphill battle for them. And Uzbekistan and Syria are going to have a mighty battle to, I think, probably finish second in this group.
Well, let's move on. Martin, I'll bring you back in for Group C, which is Iran, the United Arab Emirates, Hong Kong, and Palestine. Wael, I'm going to get your thoughts on this as well, obviously with the UAE being in there too. But Martin, firstly, it's a tasty looking group, different styles of football, and I think this is one of the more fascinating kind of groups on paper.
Yeah, I think it's the most unpredictable group on paper. You've got Iran with a new coach, UAE a little bit of a mess at the moment in terms of structurally, but they've obviously got the talent there. Hong Kong coming in with a bit more kind of optimism after quite a difficult kind of 4-year period due to COVID and what have you, but also coming back after 50 years of not coming to the tournament. And then probably Palestine are probably sneaking in there as a kind of quietly coming in form, really. And most of the time with Palestine is usually the struggle of having competitive games on the run up to a on the run up to an Asian Cup. That won't be an issue this time because of where it's situated. They'll have a couple of Asian Cup qualifiers for 2027 have already gone underway. So I think the fact that Palestine and potentially UAE, that kind of clash between those two is probably going to be the most crucial. But I'm not discounting that Iran are safely through by any means in terms of a new coach under Amir Galani, in terms of how he's going to approach things. I think it's an interesting one. I think any of these teams can start like a house on fire. Any of them can really fall off the radar. So I think this is where we're going to get a big scalp if we see one.
Well, for you, what will be the reaction in the UAE to the group and the nations that they've been drawn against?
I think it will be fairly positive. Obviously, they have played around recently. The way the groups work, I don't think they would have expected an easy opponent, 1-4-1, no matter who that was. So I think most of the focus would have been on their 4-3 and 4-4 opponents. And in that regard, I think with Palestine and Hong Kong, I think I think it's not the most difficult group. However, as mentioned, the UAE are in a transitional point. And interestingly, one of the notable absentees that we've not seen here is the UAE coach. So we've not seen Rudolph Arwell go, which raises some questions. Actually, we've also not seen the FA president, Sheikh Rashid. Instead, the UAE were represented by his vice president, Abdullah Janaibi. So that's a bit interesting and makes you wonder if it speaks about their interest in the 2023 Asian Cup and how seriously they take it.
Really interesting that. I want to come to you for Group D, Scott. I think most people looking at this draw think it's the group of death. There's always got to be a group of death, and this certainly looks like it on paper. Japan, Iraq, Vietnam, and Indonesia. Some fascinating matchups there. Some fascinating challenges. I mean, how do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, two former champions are obviously in the group. I think the thing that we haven't touched on is the timing of the tournament. Of course, it's in that early to mid-January window. So for the domestic players here in the J League, it's at the end of a busy season, and then you've got the whole question about the European players, not just for Japan, but for a range of nations as well, and how many of those will come, how many of those will be on holidays. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see too many of them, to be honest, which I think will be disappointing for the tournament. And then for Japan, like I said, you've got if it is going to be a predominantly J League based squad, you have that off the back of a very lengthy domestic campaign as well. So there are issues and challenges for Japan. We heard Moriyasu talk as well after the ceremony. He said that he felt all nations will be familiar with Japan and what kind of challenge they present. Obviously, that's the case for Vietnam under Philippe Troussier, former Japan coach a long time ago now. I guess, a very long time ago. So returning to face a country that he holds very dear in his heart. What kind of football, we've spoken on the pod before, what kind of football are we going to see under Troussier? Will it be a departure from what we saw under Park, the Korean coach? Obviously a very talented generation of players. We know that. Likewise for Indonesia, perhaps an even more gifted younger generation of players as well. So grouping two of those kind of powerhouses of Southeast Asian football together is a fascinating subplot. And then Iraq, of course, off a very successful Gulf Cup campaign under a newish coach as well. So I think it's a very, very difficult group. And it's one where I think all the nations really, I mean, you would think Japan should be good enough to get out, but it's one that you might see a real surprise nation dropping down into that fourth slot and ultimately not making it through. Paul, I'm going to come back to you for Group E, which is Korea, Republic, South Korea, Malaysia, Jordan, and Bahrain. What do you make of Group E?
They spoke to Jurgen Klinsmann immediately afterwards on the draw. I think he'd be pretty happy and pretty comfortable with that draw for Korea. There's not too many enormous challenges there. I mean, we've spoken and Martin's written for the website before of the improvement in Bahrain under Halio Sousa. So they present a potential banana skin. But otherwise, against Malaysia and Jordan, you would expect the talent of South Korea to be too strong. But I guess going back to the point you made with Japan and the talent they might have available, it's the same with Korea as well, because the timing of this tournament, how many clubs from Europe are going to be happy? I mean, they have to release them if they get selected, but how many are going to be happy to release their players? I think we saw at the last Asian Cup, Son Heung-min even arrived during the group stages, I think it was, very, very late in the piece in a sort of an agreement they came to with Tottenham. Of course, you had the Asian Games around then to try and get him that military exemption that they were dealing with as well. So you're going to have, the likes of Kim Min-jae, Hwang Hee-chan, Son Heung-min, they're going to be having to dealing with that, club versus country battle. So that might present some issues for Jurgen Klinsmann, but I still see them being good enough. Kim Pang-gon's going to coach against, of course, his home country now in charge of Malaysia. So that's an interesting subplot to this as well. Of course, you'll know Korea and the Korean plays exceptionally well. There's a lot of excitement in Malaysia for how they're going under Kim and the players and the direction that he's taken them as well. There's excitement, as I said before, about Bahrain and the sort of under the radar improvement that they've made under Halio Sousa over the last couple of years as well. And Jordan have got talent as well. So outside of Korea, who I expect to top this group, I think the battle for second is going to be really interesting as well. And we know some third place teams will get through. So that'll be interesting to see, like you said, with the other group as to which nation slips down to miss out, because all probably come in thinking that they might have had a shot, knowing that some third place teams get through of getting through to the group stage, but one of them is going to leave disappointed.
All right, and to round things out, well, we'll come back to you to look at Group F, which features Saudi Arabia, Thailand, Kyrgyzstan. I'm not quite sure the debate between, maybe Martin can fill us in, the Kyrgyz Republic versus Kyrgyzstan debate, and Oman. Obviously, you would think Saudi Arabia are, again, the heavyweights in this group, but Thailand are a real regional power over here, where I am in Southeast Asia, and then two, really curious nations as well in Kyrgyzstan and Oman. So, Wael, what do you make of Group F?
At first look, it looks like a straightforward group for Saudi Arabia, but I have my doubts. One thing is, of course, Saudi Arabia are still without a coach. Their federation has announced that they will only be naming a new coach in June. That leaves them obviously not playing any friendlies in June. So quite a short window for whoever comes in to prepare for the Asian Cup. So that's one challenge. As you've mentioned, Thailand, the powerhouse in Southeast Asia. Oman, who we've seen their two games in the World Cup qualifiers against Saudi, they were not easy. So they did pose a challenge, and I think once again they will have a lot of support as well here in Qatar. Obviously, Oman being just down the road, a lot of people will make the trip to Qatar, but so will a lot of Saudis. So quite a lot of challenges. Again, not to dismiss Kyrgyzstan, a different kind of opponent. We've seen that Saudi maybe have not historically done very well against Central Asian opponents. So quite a lot of different challenges there, and I think it's not going to be as straightforward as it looks for Saudi Arabia.
Martin, where of the three Central Asian nations that have qualified, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, where do Kyrgyzstan fit in their phase of development at this point, heading in 6 months out from the competition?
They're probably over their peak in terms of this is the second tournament that they've qualified for. So they qualified for 2019. They were on a high of optimism at that point. And then at the beginning of this campaign, they were starting to kind of go through the gears, but they've kind of lost momentum on that. Alexander Krestenen's just been sacked as coach last month. We brought in a new coach, a pretty unknown coach, in Stefan Torkovic. So there's a lot of pessimism around Kyrgyzstan at the moment. And I think this draw couldn't be any worse, really. Saudi Arabia, Thailand and Oman. I can't see, unless Tarkovic kind of turns things around, that Kyrgyzstan are going to get out of that group. Tajikistan and Uzbekistan will be really happy with their group draw. Tajikistan in the group of life, and I think Peter Sirk, to the way he's kind of setting up the team, he will attack that team and look to get a result, especially against Qatar and China. And Uzbekistan, given the way they've drawn Australia, but they won't play Australia until the last game, so they've got Syria and India. I think they'll be quite comfortable to get through that. They're in that transition period. I think there's a lot of young players come through. It's probably going to be a tournament too early to see their fullest, but I still think they've got enough, especially with Mashurapov, who are going to come through and actually make a standpoint. So in general, I think from a Central Asian perspective, it's a positive draw.
Just Martin, staying with you, I know it's ways out for the tournament. We don't have any idea, what the squads are going to look like or not. But at this early point in proceedings, if I had to put you on the spot for one or two kind of leading contenders to win the whole thing, who would they be?
I think the primary examples would be Japan and Australia. I think they're the two teams that did well in the World Cup, but both got an established manager and established approach to the approach to this tournament. I think there's a lot of question marks around Korea and Iran with new coaches. Saudi Arabia, obviously, with Renard leaving, it's going to be a question mark about that as well. So I'd say potentially Japan would be edging that out of Japan and Australia, but having an established approach, having a consistent camp is going to improve things.
Wael, for you, who do you see this far out as being maybe the early contenders?
In many ways, I agree with Martin, especially on Japan. However, one thing that you did mention is Qatar having an easy group and having a relatively easy path almost all the way to the semifinals. How does Europe comes in and sets up the new team? What kind of changes does he make being at home with all the support? We've seen they've done very well when they hosted the Arab Cup in 2021. And I think, yeah, they will be there or thereabouts. So that'll be an interesting one. Saudi will have to see, obviously, who comes in, how quickly can he adapt to the surroundings. Is it going to be someone with prior knowledge of the players, with prior knowledge of the team, and being able to get them up to speed quickly? But question marks there. But yeah, for me, I think it's got to be between Japan, Australia, or Qatar.
Just before we move off the Saudi thing, is there any suggestion? I mean, I understand that Hervé Renard's job with France is only through for the World Cup. Is that correct? Is there any chance that he might come back for a 6 month kind of stint here, or is
Now
that completely out of?
Now his contract actually runs until 2024, which is meant to include
Right, yeah.
the Olympics as well in Paris. So he runs actually after that.
Well, unless France lose all the games at the World Cup, and And who knows what happens after that? Well, for you, early contenders?
Uh, we're probably selecting from the same group of nations, but just looking at the draw, assuming the favourites win their group, you've got Australia and Japan on the same side of the draw. So if they make it through, they could meet in the semi final. But again, assuming teams win their groups, Australia could meet Saudi Arabia in a quarter final as well, which would be a tricky challenge because you'd imagine Saudi Arabia would have the massive support for that one. It'd almost be like a home game. So that's tricky for Australia on that side of the draw. So I, I would imagine someone like Japan or Saudi Arabia on that side of the draw, or Iran and Korea. I struggle to see it coming from sort of outside those 4 or 5 nations. I don't think we're going to get. I think we all say Qatar was a surprise in 2019. I don't think we're going to get that kind of surprise again, where someone outside the sort of real 4 or 5 that we saw at the World Cup are going to come through and create a surprise.
I'm going to say right now that I think Thailand can do something in this tournament. I don't know if they can win it, but I think the evolution of the group, the coach, I think they're I mean they're obviously in a tough group, and I think they're outsiders, but Thailand are my early tip to really make a stir in the tournament, guys. Thanks for jumping on for this quick reaction pod, Martin. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure.
Mr. Paul Williams, thank you.
Thank you very much, Scott.
No worries. And Mr. Wael Jabir, you can get back to the celebrations and mingling with the good and great of Asian football.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was going to grab a couple of interviews.
Excellent. And guys, that is where we will leave things for this week. But before we go, please don't forget to follow us on all our social media channels by searching The Asian Game, and make sure to rate and review the show wherever you get your podcast to help the show grow, and more importantly, help spread the word of Asian football. We'll be back shortly with another episode. But until then, it's bye for now.